What if the frantic exertion you use to force your life into order is the very wall blocking your fulfillment? You spend your days pushing against resistance, demanding outcomes from yourself, and treating every hour as a battlefield. You have been conditioned to believe that your value is entirely tied to your output, that exhaustion is a badge of honor, and that to pause is to fail. You wake up each morning already behind, carrying an unspoken weight in your chest, racing toward a distant future where you think peace is waiting for you. But ancient spiritual masters discovered a liberating paradox. The tighter you grasp, the more slips through your fingers. There is a hidden frequency of achievement used by history's most centered figures, yet it remains completely invisible to the modern eye. It is called Wei Wu Wei, a profound secret that bridges the absolute stillness of your consciousness with peak performance in the material world. By the end of this shared reflection, the internal mirror of your thoughts will feel like completely still water, and you will understand exactly how to stop overthinking, dissolve mental friction, and command your life through the art of invisible action. To understand how to access this effortless flow, we must first look closely at the invisible weight you carry every single day. Look at the anatomy of your own internal friction. Why is it that the harder you try to force creativity, the more elusive it becomes? Why does an obsessive demand for perfection instantly freeze your natural talents? The modern approach to action is built entirely on a foundation of force. You are told to wake up fighting, to conquer your day, and to rely purely on the strength of your willpower. But willpower is a finite resource. It is a fragile asset of the frantic ego. When you operate from this state of constant survival, your consciousness becomes flooded with a subtle, unyielding anxiety. You are no longer acting out of inspiration. You are acting out of the terrifying fear of not being enough. Consider a musician whose hands are tense and rigid with the desperate desire to play perfectly. The stiffness in their fingers ruins the melody. The music cannot breathe because the musician is trying too hard to dominate the instrument. This is the resistance gap, a self-made psychological barrier where overthinking isolates your natural genius. The frantic ego stands over your shoulder like a harsh judge, commentating on every move, analyzing every potential mistake, and projecting terrifying scenarios into the future. This internal friction does not elevate your quality of work. It systematically destroys your energy reserves, leading directly to deep emotional burnout and rapidly diminishing returns. When you spend your entire life forcing results, your consciousness becomes like a muddy glass of water that is constantly being stirred. The more aggressively you shake the glass to clear the debris, the muddier it becomes. The modern cult of endless striving demands that you keep stirring, keep pushing, and keep exerting until your internal landscape is entirely clouded by exhaustion. You lose touch with your intuitive intelligence. You forget how to listen to the quiet space between your thoughts, which is precisely where your greatest insights, decisions, and creative breakthroughs are born. Ancient Buddhist wisdom offers an entirely different path. It introduces us to the profound philosophy of Wei Wu Wei, a sacred term that translates directly to actionless action, or the elegant paradox of non-doing. Let us be completely clear. Non-doing is not laziness. It is not an invitation to withdraw into passive stagnation or to abandon your responsibilities. Laziness is a state of heavy inertia, driven by a fear of effort. Wei Wu Wei, however, is action in its most elevated, pristine, and unified state. It is action so perfectly aligned with the natural order of existence that it leaves no trace of strain behind. It is the art of moving along the path of least resistance. To fully grasp this, look at the natural world around you. A pristine river does not use willpower to carve through a massive mountain. It simply flows, adapting its shape to every rock, yielding when it must, yet completely transforming the landscape over time. A magnificent oak tree does not labor intensely to grow its leaves. It rests in its nature, unfolding spontaneously when the season arrives. The cosmos moves with unimaginable power, yet it operates in absolute silence. The ancient masters realized that human beings are an intrinsic part of this very same nature. Yet, we choose to live as though we are separate from it, trying to micromanage every outcome through sheer mental force. When you practice non-doing, you transition from forced labor to spontaneous execution. You fulfill your duties, you engage with your projects, and you care for your loved ones, but you do so without the crushing weight of anxiety. You stop clinging desperately to the results of your actions. Paradoxically, the moment you surrender your desperate attachment to the finish line, your steps become light, rapid, and incredibly accurate. You accelerate your goals precisely because you stopped fighting the path. When you align your internal rhythm with the universe's natural momentum, work ceases to feel like a heavy obligation and instead becomes a spontaneous expression of clarity. You no longer expend energy fighting the current. You use the current to carry you forward. This is how masters create timeless art, how leaders make flawless decisions under pressure, and how individuals maintain an unshakable sense of calm while navigating the heavy storms of daily responsibility. To enter this state of effortless flow, you must learn to dissolve the inner architect. The inner architect is that loud voice within your consciousness that is obsessed with personal identity, status, and control. It is the self-absorbed mind that constantly asks, "How do I look? Am I succeeding? What if I fail?" When you sit down to complete a crucial task, this obsession with your personal identity creates immense mental clutter. Your attention becomes divided. Half of your energy goes into the task itself, while the other half is wasted on managing the fragile self-image. Contemporary science reveals that during moments of intense pressure and performance anxiety, the prefrontal cortex, the analytical, self-monitoring region of the brain, becomes hyperactive. It begins to overanalyze movements and thoughts that should otherwise be entirely automatic. This hyperfocus creates a cognitive bottleneck, completely blocking your access to deep intuition. True mastery requires a radical shift. You must transition from being the frantic director of an action to becoming the empty medium through which the action flows. Let your mind rest on an ancient parable of a master archer. For years, the young student practiced hitting the target, focusing intensely on his stance, his grip, and his aim. Yet under pressure, his hand would always shake and his arrow would miss the mark. Seeing his frustration, the master took him to the edge of a sheer cliff, looking down into a terrifying abyss. A single, narrow wooden log overhung the drop, wet with mountain rain. The master stepped onto the small log with complete ease, looked out over the deep canyon, calmly drew his bow, and released the arrow straight into the distant target without a moment's hesitation. When the student tried to step onto the log, his inner landscape filled with the terrifying image of falling. His body locked with fear, his breathing became shallow, and his vision blurred. He could not even pull the string of his bow. The master smiled gently, pulled the student back to safety, and said, "You are focusing entirely on the arrow, the target, and your own survival. You are trying to direct the shot with your ego. To shoot masterfully, you must completely forget yourself." When the archer ceases to exist, the arrow shoots itself. When you step out of your own way, your actions become a seamless, spontaneous expression of pure clarity. You are no longer protecting an ego. You are simply allowing the intelligence of life to move through you. The fear of failure dissolves because there is no longer a separate, fragile self-image to protect. You become entirely unified with the task at hand. The writer becomes the story. The painter becomes the canvas. The creator becomes the creation. This is the ultimate peak performance, achieved not through hyperfocus and stress, but through radical surrender. How do we cultivate this invisible rhythm in the middle of a loud, demanding digital environment? It begins by integrating sacred stillness into your daily physical rituals. The state of deep flow is not a random lightning bolt that strikes by chance. It is an internal landscape that you must intentionally cultivate through steady, grounded practice. You must protect the gateway of your consciousness from the morning onwards. The moment you open your eyes, your internal mirror is completely clear. If your immediate reflex is to reach for your phone, filling your awareness with digital noise, notifications, and the chaotic opinions of strangers. You have crowded out your wisdom before your day has even begun. You have allowed the external world to violently distort your internal frequency. You have set a baseline of anxiety for the rest of your day, ensuring that every action you take will be reactive, forced, and heavy. True alignment is cultivated in simple, unhurried, grounded actions. It is found in waking early, sitting in absolute stillness, and watching the morning light slowly dissolve the shadows in your room. It is found in drinking your tea with absolute presence. A solitary individual, draped in the quiet sanctuary of the early morning, simply watches the steam rise from the cup. You feel the warmth of the ceramic cup against your hands, inhale the subtle aroma, and taste every drop without mentally racing ahead to your upcoming schedule. When you treat a simple act like drinking tea or organizing your space as a sacred ritual, you train your consciousness to stay anchored precisely where your body is. You learn to synchronize your internal quietude with the external demands of your career. When a crisis arises, or an urgent demand requires your attention, your breath becomes your ultimate sanctuary. You take a conscious pause. You allow the initial wave of panic to pass through you like a cloud drifting across a wide, empty sky. By maintaining a core of deep stillness within, you can step directly into high-stakes environments without absorbing their chaos. You become an anchor for everyone around you. Your outer life may require rapid movement, but your inner landscape remains completely unbothered. This brings us to the ultimate realization: mastering the absolute flow state under extreme pressure. There is a vast, unmistakable difference between a strained victory and a seamless expression of mastery. A strained victory leaves you wounded, depleted, and deeply anxious. But a seamless expression of mastery elevates your energy, leaving you profoundly centered, even after hours of intense creation. Consider how you have navigated your journey so far. True freedom is not the absence of storms. It is the discovery of a peace that no storm can ever touch. It is the understanding that you do not need to fight the world to build your life. You do not need to burn out your body to fulfill your potential. The most profound transformations happen when you stop striving so intensely and start allowing your natural alignment to dictate your movements. When you learn to release the unnecessary struggle, your entire presence changes. You no longer walk into a room demanding respect or trying desperately to prove your capabilities. You carry a quiet, heavy authority that others can instantly sense without you speaking a single word. You stop striving so intensely to become an embodiment of success, and instead, you realize that success is the natural byproduct of your internal equilibrium. People are naturally drawn to clarity, and opportunities flow seamlessly toward those who are anchored in their own truth. The world will always present you with endless reasons to hurry. There will always be another obligation to fulfill, another milestone to chase, and another subtle whisper telling you that you are falling behind. But true freedom is realizing that peace is not waiting for you at the very end of an exhausting to-do list. It is entirely available to you right now, in this exact breath, if you are simply willing to pause long enough to claim it. The future milestone is a mirage that recedes the closer you get to it. If you cannot find stillness in the current moment, you will never find it, no matter how much external success you accumulate. This journey is not asking you to shrink your life or lower your aspirations. It is inviting you to experience life with profound depth. Shift your focus away from endless doing and rest completely in your pristine being. When you step out of the frantic rush, the internal mirror clears, the noise dissolves, and the path ahead becomes absolutely certain. You realize that you are not separate from the world, fighting against it for survival. You are an expression of life itself, moving in perfect harmony with the whole. What is the one heavy thought or urgent expectation you are holding onto today that you know you need to let go of? What is the story you keep telling yourself about how hard you must suffer before you are allowed to be happy? To understand how to protect this unshakable equilibrium, even when your peace is tested during your quietest hours, let your awareness flow seamlessly into our next reflection. The path of non-doing is always open to you, waiting for you to step off the wheel of exhaustion and return to the quiet center of your true nature. The greatest victory of your consciousness is discovering that you never needed to force the river, because the current was carrying you all along.